again, my sub-specialization is in child adolescent psychiatry. I don't know if you know, but there are just right now there are just about 7 of us in the whole country. I think 2013 May, I was the second child psychiatrist in Karachi and perhaps the third or the fourth in Pakistan. So there was just a recent article that came out in Lancet where they looked at the data from 222 countries, and they found that there's a 25% increase in anxiety and depression, and the most vulnerable population was the young people under the age of 30 and women. I mean, I've grown up listening to कि बच्चे पैदा होते हैं तो पल भी जाते हैं, but ऐसे नहीं होता.
We're here with Dr Ayesha Mian, who with over 20 years of experience is one of Pakistan's top psychiatrists, specialising in child, adolescent and adult psychiatry. She was formerly the head of psychiatry at AKUH and has now opened up her own center of psychiatry called Synapse, which is one of the leading institutes in this country. She's an advocate of gender equality and also has been the former Dean of Students at AKUH, setting up and being a pioneer in doing a number of things which we will be talking about soon. So welcome to our series, Ayesha.
Thank you so much for having me with you, Farhat. Really happy to be here. I realized that the only thing that I really could do with a passion was psychiatry, because it allows you to work with humans at a very, very deep level. Such a privilege to work with people because they will share with you, if they trust you, sort of the deepest, darkest parts of who they are, and how they think and what they think about and how they live their lives. So I think that piece, and also it gives you a lot of space to be very creative, because each person's story is so different. It might be the same depression, anxiety, but there's a life story that comes with it that really makes each person and each patient very unique. Of course it does, and the taboo is there everywhere. I mean, it's like जब मेरे पास कोई भी patient आता है, तो my first explanation to them really is कि look, the brain is like any other organ of the body. तो आपके पैनक्रियाज स्ट्रेस में जाते हैं तो डायबिटीज़ हो जाता है, ब्लड वेसल स्ट्रेस में जाते हैं तो हाई ब्लड प्रेशर हो जाता है, ब्रेन स्ट्रेस में जाता है तो एंजाइटी हो जाती है, डिप्रेशन हो जाता है. It's like a piece of meat. It's like that organ, right? And that's how it's important to see it as an illness like any other medical disorder. It's part of your whole physical being. So that helps reduce the stigma a little bit sometimes, कि थोड़ा बहुत लोग समझना शुरू कर देते हैं कि जिस तरीके से हमने किसी भी दिल के मर्ज़ को या किडनी के मर्ज़ को या उसके मर्ज़ को देखना है, तो इसी तरह हमें मेंटल इलनेस को भी उसी तरीके से देखना है. So yes, so we see more women struggling with anxiety and depression that has happened. But it had also, the other sort of cohort that mental illness has affected is the young people. So there was just a recent article that came out in Lancet where they looked at the data from 222 countries, and they found that there's a 25% increase in anxiety and depression, and the most vulnerable population was the young people under the age of 30 and women. So those are the two cohorts that have really suffered a great deal during this pandemic. And औरतों का तो फिर वो दूसरा भी aspect है, domestic violence has gone up, of course child abuse has gone up, and just culturally again in our culture अगर हम देखें तो मर्द जो हैं वो, when men get depressed and when they get anxious, they are not trained as such to talk about it or express it as anxiety. It comes out as anger, it comes out as violence, right? Because वो बैठ के नहीं बोलेंगे कि I'm really feeling low. Unemployment of course has gone up, financial hits have happened, people have lost jobs and stuff, and unfortunately their sort of anxiety and depression comes out on the family a lot more than on other sort of aspects, in other aspects. Right, so again, my sub-specialization is in child adolescent psychiatry. I don't know if you know, but there are just right now there are just about 7 of us in the whole country, right? So we have 100,000, well, in fact 60% of our population, not even 50, 60% is under the age of 30. So we have a very young population. There's a significant prevalence of anxiety, depression, and it's for a lot of socio-cultural factors, not just because of genetics, but a lot of reasons. And nahi hai, like we just don't have trained people that are working with these kids. So the gap between a child showing any symptoms of mental health related issues, whether it's stress or anxiety or ADHD or whatever it might be, to the point that they get care, not even proper care, but just care, कि कोई doctor कोई उनको देख रहा है, is about 10 years. So you've got a pathology that has started and is sort of kind of growing and becoming worse over 10 years. So until they get help, and then उसके बाद भी of course अगर सिर्फ 7 लोग हैं पूरे मुल्क के अंदर, तो they're not getting to the right people, so they get mismanaged. Middle school and high school का stage आना शुरू होता है, तो we see an increase in eating disorders, we see an increase in anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, bipolar disorders. So you know those are the things that kind of go up at that time. PTSD, trauma related issues. So look, parenting is an art and a science, right? Again, हमारे उसमें there's, I mean, I've grown up listening to कि बच्चे पैदा होते हैं तो पल भी जाते हैं, but ऐसे नहीं होता, right? And it might be, there might have been a time when that happened because you know there was a whole village that was raising a child. You know, घर में बड़े बहन भाई होते थे, फिर छोटे बहन भाई होते थे, खाला फूफो नानी चाची, नेबरहुड के लोग एंड स्टफ, वो मोहल्ले वाला एक सिस्टम होता था, तो किसी ना किसी की नज़र रह रही होती थी, और बच्चों को अगर माँ बाप से you know सपोर्ट नहीं मिल रही है, मॉरल सपोर्ट नहीं मिल रही है, if the father is too busy or the mother is busy or you know, तो there was always somebody, कोई चचा मोहल्ले में कोई साथ जो उनको you know they were helping them, they were mentoring them, they were advising them. That is all gone. Right, we've got nuclear families, we've got you know parents who are working, we've got and then of course there is a whole exodus, inundation जो बच्चों के ऊपर of information from social media, जो कि पहले भी नहीं था. So पता उनको बहुत ज़्यादा है, knowledge, intellectually, cognitively उनके पास knowledge बहुत ज़्यादा आ रही है, but emotionally तो उसी तरीके से बच्चे बड़े हो रहे हैं जिस तरीके से पहले हम होते थे. तो that is creating this rift where you know parents need to understand that they need to be present to answer children's questions a lot more, and they will have questions. हम तो शायद डरते भी थे, मैं तो अभी भी डरती हूँ, you know, it's like before I go and ask parents questions, they will, you know, but these kids are very open, they'll come ask you questions and you can't dismiss them, because अगर आप उनको dismiss कर रहे हैं, ये कह रहे हैं कि मेरे पास वक्त नहीं है, या ये क्यों किस किस्म का तुम सवाल पूछ रहे हो या पूछ रही हो, look at your age, and is it, you know, it's like freaking out. Instead of that, if you don't answer, they'll go to the net, they won't go to another adult. Red flags, of course, you know, बहुत सारे हो सकते हैं, but if I were to pick up some small ones, is that if there is a change in personality, you know, somebody who's kind of happy-go-lucky, chill and stuff is now suddenly quieter, is irritable, चिड़चिड़ापन बढ़ रहा है, they're snapping at you a little bit more, or they're isolating, you know, साथ नहीं आ रहे, साथ मिलके नहीं बैठ रहे, खाना साथ नहीं खा रहे, wanting to be alone in the room or so. So all of academic decline, academic change, you know, there was earlier it was a B grade student जिसके B's आ रहे हैं, A grade student जिसके B's आ रहे हैं, you know, sports या खेलते थे या और कोई co-curriculars करते थे, वो छोड़ दिए हैं. So whenever there's a change in what's happening, now that doesn't mean that there is a mental health disorder, right? But it just means there's something going on. So it's good to like ask them, it's good to talk to them, it's good to sort of reach out to someone. There are therapists around, you know, then there are psychiatrists. It's important to know, you know, I kind of show myself on social media quite a bit because I want people to see कि you know psychiatrists ऐसे लगते हैं. I'm not scary looking, I'm not, and a lot of times, Farhat, honestly, about good 40-50% of the times, I'm actually de-pathologizing children. I'm telling parents that come to me कि कुछ नहीं है, आप परेशान ना हो. So you know, डर यही होता है हम चले जाएंगे तो वो कोई बड़ा सा लेबल दे देंगे और दवाइयाँ दे देंगे. That's not the case. So देखिए मैं again, I always give the analogy of another illness, right? So for example, कोई हल्के फुल्के ब्लड प्रेशर के साथ आता है तो हम उनको कहते हैं कि आप नमक कम करें खाने में, आप एक्सरसाइज शुरू करें, आप अपना स्ट्रेस कम करें, योगा स्टार्ट कर लें, you know, किक बॉक्सिंग पे चले जाएं or whatever, or you know, do some meditation kind of things. आपकी ज़िंदगी में स्ट्रेस बहुत है, you know, see a counselor, see a therapist, talk to somebody, talk to a mentor, so that because the stress is causing all of that. You know, high blood pressure. If that doesn't work, then we say do all of these, but perhaps you also need to start medication, right? That's exactly how any kind of anxiety, depression, stress in children, adolescents, adults is okay. The first response or reaction that we have, depending on कितना severe illness है, mild to moderate है, तो मेरे हमेशा prescription पे सबसे पहले मैं exercise लिखती हूँ, फिर मैं mindfulness के apps के बारे में लिखती हूँ, meditation लिखती हूँ, YouTube पे योगा की videos का बताती हूँ, I tell them for children, get them to join co-curricular activities. I tell parents कि please grades पे से थोड़ा सा नज़र हटाएं, it's not that important. Put them in music. Music is fantastic. Sports is fantastic. So, and then if those things don't work, or if there is a pathology that's severe, just keep on, if there is a strong family history, for example, then sometimes, you need to do all of those, but also add medication because, genetics is not on this child's or adult side, right? But that's what I would do with any other illness too. Yeah, so we've seen that in COVID quite a bit, right? So I think what happened during COVID is that आपके जो जितने भी और distractions थे आपकी ज़िंदगी के, आप स्कूल जाते थे, फिर ट्यूशन जाते थे, फिर अपने co-curriculars पे जाते थे, playground जाते थे, whatever else that you did, those went away. So the only sort of outlet that children and adolescents had was the TV or the screen or the social media. And honestly, even us, all of the mental health experts globally were telling parents कि ease up, this is a very very hard time for children, तो कोई बात नहीं अगर एक आध घंटे बैठ के देख रहे हैं कर रहे हैं, it's okay because और क्या करें, बाहर नहीं जा रहे थे, कुछ नहीं कर रहे थे, schools बंद हो गए थे. So what happened with that was that there was this sort of whole obsession that we've seen with Snapchat. I'd never seen, but every time I would go on Snapchat, even before COVID, all I saw was videos of food. खाने बन रहे हैं, recipes हो रही हैं, different ways of and stuff. So there was that. There was, of course, videos and TikToks of people kind of dressing up, using filters, looking a certain way. So here you are kind of, watching videos of food and watching videos of, and then there are people kind of saying कि नहीं इसमें इतनी calories हैं तो इसको आपने ऐसे कम करना है, इसको इस तरह बनाना है. So even adults were talking about कि पेट बढ़ गया है या weight बढ़ गया है. So that conversation then has led globally again to a rise in anxiety, depression, and eating disorders. Eating disorders has really shot off the roof. Yeah. So when I decided to move back from the US in 2013, really it was in my mind I wanted to influence the space of mental health in Pakistan, right? Kind of give it a different look, give it make it attractive, make it appealing, make it accessible. This is what it looks like. And the big piece, because I had subspecialty training in children and adolescents, and I feel very very passionately about youth. I mean, it's that's just my thing. I love teenagers. I love working with them. It's a lot of fun, and that's what I wanted to introduce because कुछ भी नहीं था यहाँ पे. उस वक्त जब मैं आ रही थी, I think 2013 में, I was the second child psychiatrist in Karachi and perhaps the third or the fourth in Pakistan, right? So there was really nothing there, and we need training. We needed a training program, so there was no training program. Psychiatry के training residency programs हैं in different university hospitals, but there's nothing for child and adolescent psychiatry. So it took us 2 years because it takes a while. It's a 2-year long program. Curriculum होता है, फिर आपको accredit करवाना होता है and stuff. We have a signed MOU with a couple of places in the US. So it's a very robust training program. That has been created with my mentors at Yale University, Stanford, and a lot of places. So very cutting edge. Has a very big leadership component in it as well because I feel कि जो भी 3-4 हर 2 साल के बाद एक अगर निकल रहा है, so they should have leadership capacities to be able to start programs in the community and at large and stuff. So it has that. It's at Arfan University, and at this point it's still the only one that exists. But the idea within that, so हमारे जो भी fellow trainees होते थे उनको एक कोई leadership program करना होता था. The idea is to build the capacity of schools, school teachers, parents. One of the reasons to start Synapse really was to create a space where we could get everyone who is interested and should be talking about mental health and not us. So at this point, Farhat, no, but the conversation has started. So it's been nice because I think अभी भी अगर हमारा जो T20 World Cup भी हुआ, I don't know if you noticed, but हर match में on my mind #on my mind का there was an advertisement constant हर match में आ रहा था, which is a mental health initiative, right, to take care of your mental health and stuff. So it's become a very very big thing now. So ये tennis players हैं या gymnasts हैं या cricket है. Ben Stokes, the cricketer, who said that I'm going to take a year off. We have a colleague in the UK who's a psychiatrist, born and bred in UK, but Pakistani origin, whose work is specifically in working with cricket and mental health, the cricketers' ki mental health, the lead cricketers' ki mental health. So that conversation has started. Sana Mir was really good. She started talking about mental health. Uruj now, who's again past cricket captain, has been talking about mental health. PCB had reached out to us at some point with British Asian Trust as well, and they're talking about mental wellness. Hajra Khan, who's our football captain, she's very big on an advocate of mental health. So conversation start ho gaya hai, and we just recently did a webinar with Uruj and again Dr Hassan, who's a psychiatrist in UK, and Dr Saad Shafkat, who's a crick info writer and a neurologist, to talk about how can we initiate this conversation about developing programs for mental wellness. It's still coming from women athletes.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I was noticing that all the names you mentioned.
Yes, it's coming from women athletes, and it would be lovely to have our male athletes also kind of, because they are under a tremendous amount of stress. Yes,
the whole country is invested.
Exactly.
In watching them.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Once I came back to Pakistan, I came as the chair of the Department of Psychiatry. 3 saal ke baad, I had a chat with the president, who said, Ayesha, I'd like you to develop an office of student experience, which was an AQ global office. So that put me very quickly in the sort of top leadership space of AQ global, not just AQ Pakistan, and that's where I started noticing the problems or the microaggressions or the macroaggressions that women in leadership kind of feel. And it's not something that happens consciously. I think there's lots of unconscious biases that happen. But when you are on the table and suddenly aap baat kar rahe hain and somebody will cut you off and start a parallel conversation, would never happen with a man. So tiny things like that I started picking up. Every time I had to do something, it had to be justified, and there was no room for failure, because anything that failed meant, look, we had told you shouldn't have given to a woman. So AKU is fantastic because AKU has done a lot for women empowerment. Aapka first nursing school, of course, at AKU, हमारे medical students 50-60%, AKU IED, which is the Institute of Education Development, mostly women. But वो जब आप ग्लास सीलिंग आहिस्ता आहिस्ता वो लीकी पाइपलाइन जिसको हम कहते हैं, जैसे जैसे आप ऊपर जाते जाते हैं तो वो कम होते जाते हैं, तो आपका जो सी suite है, that still looks primarily 90% is like men in black suits, right, or grey suits. That's when I went to the president again, like I had gone for the dean of students thing, and I said, can we do something? And he's immediate past president, was fantastic, and he hardly ever said no to me, and he said, Ayesha, create something, but focus on women in leadership, because that's where our gap is. It was a fantastic conference. I really enjoyed myself because we got a lot of people from outside, from the corporates, from Standard Chartered, from Unilever, from stuff. So a lot of women leaders in those spaces, or men leaders who were given the mandate to increase women capacity in their organizations. We got women like Roshani Zafar, and we got Jara, and the women who are leading in their own spaces, to Beena Shah, who talks about feminism, to sort of have this larger conversation of how do you strategically take this forward, so that it's not just one other conference, but that the conversation started and we kind of plug it into the design of what AKU does. So I've never been able to create a balance. I think it's always balance, again, as I say, is एक चीज़ ऊपर जा रही है तो दूसरी नीचे आती है. What I did when the kids were younger, one, very supportive husband. Supportive bhi nahi, he was like, okay, you do your own thing. It's like he was just that, of course, it's like I think he's kind of gender neutral like that, or gender blind, that, that was just not even a conversation. So I was sort of working in my space, and, achieving all of these things, but it was never in the picture. I think it was just, there was a lot of passion for mental health in that space, so वो automatically होता जा रहा था. Like ऐसा कुछ नहीं था कि मैंने ये करना है, यहाँ पहुँचना है, ये करना है. But what I did very early on was to, we were talking about the village earlier, create a village. So I was in Houston, I was in the US, and my younger sister was there. So वो और उसकी, she was in college those days at University of Houston. वो और उसके friends मेरे, they would take my son to college with them. तो वो दिन के 3-4 घंटे जो है वो college, he was a good kid, so would attend classes with them. And stuff. Then my friends, really. So, but I created all of those. So there were a lot of khalas and stuff and mamus and that were created for these kids that I created. So what happened with that was, in certain ways, I think partly I needed to, but also the kids became independent quickly, and also they are very comfortable with meeting new people and connecting with them, and this also comes from a child psychiatry perspective as well, that it's very important for children to learn from a lot of different people. वो जो insecurity होती है कि पता नहीं वो क्या बता देंगे, क्या सिखा देंगे, क्या कह देंगे. It's have other people be part of, ask for help, and get other people to engage in your children's life. So that helped, I think, from that perspective. Also, more than work-life balance, I talk about work-life integration. So it's very, very important for your children to know the work that you're doing. Okay, so if our parents are disappearing for 1 week or 2 weeks or what do they do? So as much as possible, I would take them. अगर possible होता था कि conferences पे भी साथ ले गई, जब वो बड़े हो गए, AKU में कुछ होता था, so they would come and see that. So it's not like they're having a fun time, and it's like they're part of it, and they're seeing it, and they're kind of seeing the larger vision and mission of what you're trying to do. Oops, that's a hard one. So I think there are things that women do that inspire me, right? So I feel that, for example, Rosa Parks went and sat in the bus where African Americans could only sit behind and front, and say, no, I'm going to sit in front. Why can't I sit in front? And she, talked about freedom of spaces and nudged a boundary, right? हमारे उसमें आप देखें, यास्मीन लारी, first architect, Sabine nudged boundaries, Sabine nudged boundaries, and a lot of other people that kind of do their small. Isma Chuftai wrote what she wrote, and Fehmi Darya's writing feminist poetry, things that have not been done before, and they nudged boundaries. I think that truly inspires me, where I feel that things, Ruth Ginsburg became the Supreme Court, the first justice. Nigar now has become the first Lieutenant General. Like they're putting themselves in spaces जहाँ पे और किसी ने नहीं, कुछ किया है.
Well, it's been amazing talking to you.
Thank you.
What I've really taken away from this is not only that you're working in a very, very important field, but also the impact that you're creating around you. I think that is by far the most important thing.
Thank you.
Helping people and taking up initiatives and creating impact.